I noticed that these Silicon Valley companies would go through a predictable pattern. They would be sort of a paradox of clarity. They'd be very clear in the early days about who they were and what they were trying to do, and that led to success. Success breeded options, but options breeded a lack of clarity.
What are you getting after? What seeds are you planting? What are you overcoming? Think big. Think even bigger. Take some risks. God's got your back. Go for it. Don't hold back. Don't ever have regrets in your life. Go fail. Go grow from those things. Live your life.
Your identity is not defined by your successes or your failures.
If you're not happy where you're at, you won't be happy where you're going. Choose to do the things that will make you the person you want to be, that will make you a better person next week and next year.
You're going to have to leave some things you're actually good at behind so that you can find what you're wired for, what you're born for.
Being a world-class entrepreneur is being in every area of life excellent.
It is the little things that are so easy not to do.
The best thing that you can do is assume the best in people.
I want people around the world to believe they can do something great with their life.
If I build the biggest business, but I destroy my physical body and I lose my health, I don't think that's success. While you're on the journey climbing to success, never forget the things that matter most.
If you like this episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the Heart Healthy Hustle Show. I'm your host, Jonathan Frederick. Today, we are joined with a New York Times bestselling author, Greg McKeown. Greg, say hello to the audience.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Greg is the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. In the book, Greg describes an approach similar to minimalism that gets us to ask the right questions about where we're spending our time, energy, and efforts. He first started noticing these things when he noticed his priorities shifting in his own life and career. We'll get into that in this interview. Greg, I love starting out the show with a favorite success quote, something that you may live by. If there's anything that drives you, go ahead and share with us.
Well, something that someone once said to me I think is interesting is success traps are harder to get out of than failure traps. And I think that goes to the very spirit of our conversation today, because typically people think about the failure traps in their lives and wanting to get out of those and change their bad habits and so on. But actually, sometimes it's the good habits, it's the good things that are getting in the way of actually breaking through to your highest point of contribution. Success traps keep you going, incentivize you to carry on, and sometimes that gets in the way of the next level of success.
You've done hundreds of interviews. We were talking before this interview briefly. You've done hundreds, plural, interviews on podcasts. You've spoken at Google. You've done a lot of presentations. Is that what you're currently doing?
I really just do two things. I write and I teach. That's it. That's what I love to do. And so I'm professionally, I'll either be writing. I'm working on a new book right now, but early days, and then I speak and teach in a variety of settings around the world.
Can you share with us one of your most exciting experiences presenting?
The first that comes to mind was working with a company that reached out to me earlier this year. They said, we went through a process of trying to curate 5 books that would make up our core library. You know, the intellectual brain of our culture. And they had multiple people involved in the effort. They were reading certainly upwards of 100 books, but maybe considerably more than that. And they were whittling them down. Then they got down to 5, and Essentialism was one of the 5. And so when I went to the company and was doing a keynote there, I mean, everybody, it was probably, I don't know, certainly upwards of 1,000 people in the room, and all of them had either read Essentialism or were currently reading it because they just launched a 90-day effort in which everybody was encouraged. Nobody's mandated. It's not mandated, but but everyone was encouraged to read the book over that time. And so that was a very interesting beginning, because the more people are exposed to essentialism, the more the term that I would use is absorptive capacity. Their ability to absorb it goes up. Essentialism, as it turns out, is far more countercultural than I realized when I wrote the book. I knew it was countercultural, otherwise there's no need for the book, but it's more countercultural than I realized. Whole organizational cultures are steeped in non-essentialism. And so what I found is that if you have one person, I mean, the way it normally works, as it did with this company, is one person somewhere reads essentialism, and it may, maybe they find somebody else there that's read it too, and suddenly they're not alone anymore, and they talk about it and they say, my goodness, look at what we're doing. We're just falling into these non-essentialist traps all over the place, and wouldn't it be great if we could find an alternative way of doing it? Essentialism could be that alternative, and then they grow it, and it's a sort of book club, and so it grows until you can get a kind of tipping point moment where there's enough people learning the new language that they can have a new conversation. When that happens, the culture of the organization has already changed. It's not some future, eventually we'll have a certain kind of culture. No, if you've changed the conversation, the culture's already changed. Now you can do something different. And that's how it was in this room with this group. And so they were very open and they were teachable and even vulnerable. And so together we could just be present and we were able to learn new things together.
Wow.
And have these little breakthrough moments. We were talking about how to apply essentialism. And instead of talking about it, instead of talking about how to ride a bike, we just got right into it. Okay, let's ride the bike. Let's do it. So I had them go through an exercise where they could apply it right now in real time, and then I picked one of the people to come up on the stage, and their answers were really interesting and surprising, and the whole group was there. So that was an experience that stands out for me.
That was recent?
Oh yeah, that was it was certainly this year.
I'm curious to know, when you started teaching, okay, obviously you've written the book, you're adopting your own principles. When you started going out and teaching about this, did you ever feel like a sense of, are you like so hyper committed to excellence where you never have dealt with any self-doubt, or do you ever deal with any, especially when you first started, did you deal with self-doubt?
Yes. I mean, I didn't feel, what you described there is like excellence, sounds actually like overconfidence. And I did not feel that at the beginning, and I don't feel it now. I feel pretty sure that I'm as nervous when I get up to teach now as I ever have been, and as anybody else is that I observe teaching. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a necessary thing to treat each teaching and learning opportunity with the respect it deserves. People are putting their time on the line. First of all, I'm asking them to be open, and my job is to come to that conversation prepared, more prepared than I was a month ago, more prepared than I was 6 months ago. I'm hungry to learn. I'm hungry to try to understand how to apply these ideas better in my own life and to the people that I'm having the opportunity to teach.
That's fantastic. I asked that because it is always curious to me. You're from the UK, correct?
That's right.
Originally. It's interesting to me, you had a New York Times best-selling book. You're in the US now, living on the West Coast here. Even with that book being a bestseller, you still deal with that healthy amount of, I'm not going to say you were nervous. I don't think you said that. But anyway, I want to get into the actual meat of your book, Essentialism. It's been out for a couple years now. It's something that I've personally read and changed my life. It's interesting. As I was reviewing a lot of information in preparation for our time together today, Greg, it hit me how much I've been adopting a lot of essentialism without remembering that it was coming from having gone through your book, which
that's interesting.
It is very interesting. It is, and I love when that happens where you remember, this is where I've been doing this every day, and it came from Essentialism. It came from here. A tremendous book. For the listeners who are already itching to go and pick up your book after listening to this, share with them what sparked your interest to write this book in the first place.
Well, I was working with Silicon Valley companies for many years and noticed a predictable pattern that I can describe in a moment. But it was this combination of observing a particular pattern in these companies and then also having an experience personally that coalesced to give, to sort of sparking a fire for the deed to go out and research and ultimately then write this book. So the pattern professionally was, I noticed that these Silicon Valley companies would go through a predictable pattern. They would be sort of a paradox of clarity. They'd be very clear in the early days about who they were and what they were trying to do, and that led to success. Success breeded options, but options breeded a lack of clarity. You get pulled into so many different directions that that actually undermines the very clarity that led to success in the first place. And so to borrow Jim Collins' term, this is the undisciplined pursuit of more. That's the pattern, and it leads to plateauing in success or even failing altogether, as is the case in many companies in Silicon Valley history, and also many companies outside of that industry. So I thought that was a curious and interesting pattern that helps to explain why otherwise successful companies don't continue to be successful. But then on the personal side, I remember getting an email from my colleague at the time said Friday would be, between 1 and 2, would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby. My wife was expecting at the time, otherwise that's an even stranger email to receive. To my shame, my daughter's born Thursday in the middle of the night, and Friday I am torn between what to do, but to my shame, I try and do both, and I, leave my wife Anna and our daughter at the hospital and run to this meeting, and I just, it's clear, it's just obvious to anybody that hears the story. It's clear to me I made a fool's bargain, that I violated something more essential for something less essential, and really I was going through the same pattern that I had just described and observed in these Silicon Valley companies. And so what I learned from the lesson was, from this experience, was simple, which is if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will.
Yeah. Or many people.
Well, that's exactly right. And so I was very, the combination of seeing the same pattern happen at the organizational level and the individual level gave me this sense of mission to go out and really try to study it, to name it, to get understanding about what drives us to say yes to non-essentials and no to essentials instead of the other way around. And so essentialism grew out of that research and that pursuit.
Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong. I remember hearing that nothing came of that. It didn't impress those clients after all.
Well, yes. I think the look on their faces didn't really evince a sort of confidence that I'd made a smart move. I remember my colleague said, the client will respect you for the choice you just made, but I just don't really remember that being what happened, and as you say, nothing material did come from that meeting. So, but even if it did, it's clear, but in hindsight, it's clear, and it should have been clear in the moment. And what I found was, as I started doing this research, is that I am not the only person, maybe the only person who did exactly that, but not the only person who has tried to do lots of things and ended up doing them averagely well instead of the few things and really making the right trade-offs. And so, people listening to this can ask themselves, have they ever found themselves like I was, feeling stretched too thin at work or at home? Have they ever found themselves busy but not productive? Have they ever found themselves where their day is being hijacked by other people's agenda for them? And if they're saying yes to any of the above, then the way out is the way of the essentialist. If the problem is the undisciplined pursuit of more, then the antidote is the disciplined pursuit of less.
Which is in and of itself will yield more and better results, right?
Well, that's exactly right. Yes, we have a garden that we've planted in our yard, and it's a ecological fact, right? If we want to have a good harvest, then there has to be good pruning. And at the right time, and it has to be thoughtful. It's not just you can't just if you hack the whole tree down, that's not going to work. If you hack the whole vine down without knowledge, that's not going to work. So it's got to be a disciplined approach. But if you want a great return, then you actually have to approach it in a disciplined pursuit of the essential, rather than an undisciplined pursuit of the non-essential.
Right. So for somebody listening, we kind of touched on why you would want to, adopt essentialism. Is that what how would you describe that? Adopting essentialism? Is that how you'd say it?
Yes. I mean, I think
implementing, I guess.
Well, I think ultimately it's about becoming something that we weren't before. It's becoming a particular kind of leader, and it's the kind of leader that helps us to break through to the next level. So whether that's leading a team or a company, as in the Silicon Valley companies that I was referencing before, or whether it's self-leadership, it's the same idea. If you want to break through to a higher point of contribution, then you're more likely to achieve that by doing the right few things better, rather than just reactively doing lots of stuff when you make a millimeter progress in a million different directions. And where this gets interesting or complicated is that we are not living in neutral times, in applying what we're talking about. If we had to, we could examine the current cultural norm of the United States. We could do this for any developed country, but if you take and you say, okay, well, where on the normal distribution curve would we be right now? Are we culturally more like the disciplined pursuit of less, or more like the undisciplined pursuit of more? And having asked this question out to many, many thousands of people, you find that there is an understanding that we are skewed to the undisciplined pursuit of more. And the importance of that is that if you simply go with the flow, go with the cultural flow, you'll be a non-essentialist. You will be doing too many things. And the costs of that are perfectly predictable. You will be stretched too thin. You will feel stressed. You will tend to make, to feel motion sick instead of building momentum around the things that really matter. And if you extrapolate that a little larger, what you find is that people spend, decades doing this. Often, like their whole life will get full of good and unimportant stuff. And the most important, the essential few, the vital few things actually are massively underinvested in. And so, I don't want to be depressing about it, but the fact is that if you have that cultural norm and you take it forward to its logical conclusion, right? Take it forward for decades, that's the stuff that life regrets are made of. And it's not just one or two people at the end. It's not in fact, it's many people.
Right.
They get to the end and then they wake up. One of the things that's been interesting to me is how many people have reached out to me and said things like, yes, I've really enjoyed reading Essentialism. I wish I'd had it. And then they have, some people, okay, I wish I'd had it 10 years ago. But sometimes the answer will be, I wish I'd had it 50 years ago. And those are quite humbling moments, really. Like somebody is trying to bequeath to us, whether they really mean to or not, that idea.
Yeah.
Don't spend 50 years working on some good or trivial set of activities. You've only got this tiny, minute, pathetically small, really, period of time. And so you just have no time for doing for doing the stuff that doesn't satisfy, for doing the stuff that is of low importance. It's going to be over so fast.
Yeah. And time is not neutral itself. It's always ticking. The clock doesn't stop for anyone. So that's something that is always, it's like this impending, the only thing that is certain in life is death, correct? And then we're looking at a quote here. It popped in my head when you were saying that, from a past guest. Dr. Ron Walborn said, sometimes you have to let go of the things you're good at to find what you're great at, what you're born for. And I think...
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's fine. I believe that, by implementing Essentialism, you'll be able to more, it's so helpful to, navigate that. And that being said, I think that the key word that stood out to me the most that I see as a young professional, as a young driven professional that wants nothing more than to make a positive contribution and not be held back even by myself, is that self-management, that self, I see that is so lacking in today's society. And I think it may be to very little, it's all a system. Everything's being marketed to us, this, that, and the third. Social media is all a lot of noise, trying to do this, sell that. And we get that. So how can we say no? For the listener out there who's having their agenda hijacked by people, just they're afraid to say no to, how can we learn to say no?
Well, there's two ways to think about the answer to that question. The first, and I think where people go to emotionally, is, okay, how do I say no to my boss's boss? Something very career limiting like that. And it doesn't seem realistic to them to do that. And whenever somebody suggests that sort of thing to me, I always say, well, yeah, I wouldn't start with that if I were you. That doesn't seem very sensible to me either. And nor was that my attempt in writing Essentialism to imply that. I didn't write a book called Noism. And the difference makes all the difference. I wrote Essentialism. And so it's about focusing on the things that really matter, saying yes to the things that matter most, and letting the non-essentials fall out of our lives. I think the best way I can imagine to really answer this, though, to give it, to make it real rather than to stay in the conceptual level, is for me to just turn this around and ask you some questions. Are you game for that?
Oh, please. It almost didn't hit me what you were saying. Okay.
So let's just do it. Let's just apply Essentialism to you right now.
Cool.
And everyone listening will be able to see, even if they have different answers, they'll be able to recognize the kind of process they need to go through.
All right, I'm ready. I'm getting psyched up here. I'm ready.
First question, right? And I want your first answer to it, which is, what is something that is essential to you, very important, that you are currently underinvesting in? Go, just tell me. First thought.
Relationship. Family relationships.
Okay. I'm gonna double click on that for a little while, and then so there's really 3 questions I'm going to ask you. But the first one is about exploring what's essential, and I'm going to double click on that for a while. Then we'll move to step 2. So under step 1, staying on that, what do you mean by that? Tell me more about that. Invest in family relationships. Who is it that you need to invest in?
My entire family. We're just, it's hard because of the distance, and it goes both ways, to be honest. But it's not that I'm underinvesting. I guess I am underinvesting, but it's due to my over focus, or not hyper focus, but strong focus on things that I believe will yield more freedom in time so that I can invest in them more. And it's funny because, keeping my answers brief, my brother-in-law and I were talking at one point saying, we're both in this hustle grind mode, we're preparing for the future. And simultaneously, my sister's having babies, left and right. I mean, so he recognized, like, okay, I'm having the kids now, I'm investing in their lives now. And he does a great job of being present, tremendous father figure for them. And it's amazing to see that. But it was that funny conversation we're already having. I'm still in my late 20s, and having that conversation with him in his early 30s was just amazing, because that mentality of, let me prepare for the future so that I will be free to be there for them. And then time's ticking.
Yeah. What I think you're saying there is that life is sometimes appears backwards, because you have to invest up front all at the same time. People are getting married, they're having children, they're going forward, and it's what it is a challenging prioritization dilemma. Where do I put the investment when it's all expected at the beginning? We're making all these decisions at the beginning when we sort of know the least and we have the least resources available. But nevertheless, what you said is, yes, I'm wanting to invest now so I have freedom later. I understand that. But there's still something on your mind about, but nevertheless, I'm not spending. I wish I was spending a little more on these relationships, because otherwise I'm going to miss something that really matters down the road. I'm putting words in your mouth here, but is that sounding right?
Yes.
Help me to understand what you think the delta is. Like, how much time would you need to spend with your extended, with your family, to feel not like, oh, I'm perfect now, I couldn't invest more, but to feel like, that would make me feel like I was investing appropriately for where I'm at in my life and where they are in their life. What are we talking? Give me it in terms of like minutes or hours per week.
At least 5 hours per week.
Okay. So the delta is 5 hours. If you were spending 5 hours in a week, per week, in those relationships, you would feel like, no, I'm well, you said at least, but I'm making a substantial new investment that would, I'm sure, pay off well down the road. Does that sound right?
Yes.
What would you do with that 5 hours? Just curious. Does that look like sort of talking to each person on the phone an hour each or something like that? Is that what you imagine?
Well, I meant more in person. We'd have to relocate though in order to do that. But yeah, I mean, given my present situation right now, yes, on the phone, hour each. Yeah.
How much time do you spend right now invested in them?
Gosh, every time. I'm sorry?
Honest answer.
How much time? Like actual minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like what did you do this in the last 7 days?
At least I would say, honest answer, I don't think I've called anyone in the last 7 days, but I did spend at least an hour in communication, whether that was voice to text or voice memos or actual text messages.
Yeah, I hear you. There is interaction going on. Mm-hmm. It's not phone calls. It's not video conferences, but there is interaction. And that's because you have this is the premise of your whole answer is I value these relationships. I care about my family. This is really important. So even without deliberately focusing on this, there's still communication because you have these relationships and they matter to you. So that all makes sense to me. So, it sounds like, and there's a point I'm making here, it sounds like even if you spent less than 5 hours, like let's say that you said, I'm going to spend 2 hours with doing a video conference with everybody in the family once a week, Sunday afternoon, whatever. You say, well, I'm going to set a calendar appointment, and every 2 p.m. on Sunday, I'm going to video conference everybody, and whoever's available is going to get on there, and I'm going to do it every week. Even if you did that and it was 2 hours, so it's not even the 5 hours that you said was at least what you would want to be spending, but you spent 2 hours and you did it every week, the consistency of that would make a big difference over time because you start to know about what's going on in each other's lives this week. You don't just have a pre-existing relationship, you have a living relationship, a current interaction. Well
said.
Okay, so that was all under step one. And it's the biggest of the 3 steps, I would say, because you got to get clear about what's essential, why it matters, and not just have a general intent, but something quite concrete. And we, I think, got to a concrete objective. So step 2 is the opposite end of the spectrum. So now what I want you to do is I want you to identify, and it doesn't have to be one thing, it could be several things, but just the first things that come to your mind. What are non-essential activities, unimportant stuff that you are over-investing in right now? First thoughts.
Leisure.
Like what?
Scrolling social media for lack of a planned recreational activity, because I believe play is actually productive.
Yeah. There's active play and there's passive play, and you're describing passive play, right? It's if you put somebody in a if you were to map what's going on inside of somebody's brain, their brain activity while they're on social media versus while they're playing tennis or doing something that's or pursuing a hobby that's that's fulfilling and interesting, is completely different.
Yeah. So, did you say tennis?
Yeah.
Well, if you're ever in North Carolina, let me know. I'll serve a couple sets to you.
I look forward to doing that with you. I like a game of tennis. I'm not especially good, but like it.
Same.
So social media. So you say scrolling social media, surfing the web. Honest answer: how much time have you spent doing that? The last 7 days.
Probably up to 3.5 hours.
Right. Okay. Let's take that. Now it could be longer, and I'm not trying to attack your answer or your honesty, but what I've observed is that when you if you do this in person, you actually get the data off someone's phone, and then you get you capture it, or you find, generally speaking, people are spending more than they think they are. So I'm not making a point about you, just a general point that what we think is actually 3 hours, when we actually add it up and you say, oh, well, actually I was on Netflix as well, so they're watching a series on there, so that's another hour or 2 a day, and people, it adds up quickly. I just was worked with somebody, and actually they didn't even need that kind of extra looking coaching. They just admitted immediately, I'm spending between 15 and 18 hours a day on social, not a day, excuse me, a week on social media. They had effectively a part-time job checking social media. And they eliminated that. So, but let's just take your 3.5 hours. right? You were looking, by the time we went through this process, we were looking for 2 hours, and we just found 3.5, and we didn't even have to look, especially hard. There's bound to be other things. But you can take 2 hours of that and you can say, okay, I'm reallocating that. I'm making a trade-off. I am going to deliberately choose something that's essential, calling my family for 2 hours, and get rid of this thing that is relatively non-essential. Okay, so this is step 2. Step 2 is to identify what is non-essential that we can eliminate, reduce, or eliminate. Step 3, and there were only 3 steps, step 3 is execution. And that is really this question. It's how can we make it as effortless as possible for you to do what we've just identified, to make that trade-off.
Hack the susceptibilities of, even having it on the phone, even though I do use it for business.
So precisely. So that's, you're already getting to the gist of it immediately. I mean, there are a variety of ways that we can hack this now, right? One way is, okay, take the app off your phone, right? Because you've added friction, so it makes it a little harder to access the social media. Even if you simply say it's off my phone and it's still on my laptop, that's still one extra step. You're not going to as effortlessly be on that social media. So that's a step. It's necessary but insufficient, but it's a step. You could ask somebody to you could give them your password, and maybe it's as simple as this. Maybe you only get the password back each week once you've had the call with your family.
Okay.
That somebody gives you the new password for the week, and they're able to go in there and change it after whatever, maybe after a certain time. You could take a $100 challenge, the $100 challenge, which is this, that you offer $100 to someone else in your family, and any week that you don't initiate this call with them, they get to
collect
use that $100. Well, maybe they already have the $100. You give it to them up front, but they get to use it.
Security deposit.
They want the security deposit because it adds incentive to you to follow through. You have an accountability partner that's inherent in these examples I just gave, but an accountability partner, somebody that you speak to. You could write a contract, social contract. We'll talk about this in Essentialism, but you could. I don't go into sufficient detail probably, but you can write it out, and actually sign it. If you don't sign it, it doesn't work nearly as well. You sign it, and you are making a determination. It can have all the details in there. I'm allowed to be on social media only for this amount of time per day, so that I can achieve this objective. I mean, the idea that somebody's on social media for business is of course valid. But I question it too, because it's like valid, and because social media can be a good servant but a poor master, and so there are services that you can use where you can be sharing your insights and content, but you yourself are not actually in the swamp of social media. So occasionally you're in there. Mm-hmm. To respond if people are responding to you and so on, asking questions, and so that you have office hours. You have social media office hours. So you say, okay, I will be available, but I'm not going to be available 24/7. A professor would never sign up for that. It'd be crazy, wouldn't it? You say, okay, I'm available between these 2 times, 1 hour Tuesday, 1 hour Thursday, and you set it on your schedule. And so I'm going to do that work. There's a place for that, but I'm not going to just allow the boundarylessness of social media to dictate my behavior. And let us not be in any doubt that is precisely what the social media companies are trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they've applied everything we're talking about. They want to make execution as effortless as possible. They want to make it easy, effortless, truly effortless for us to be on social media. They've spent enormous amounts of money developing the hardware and the software and the interactivity, and are studying this day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
You name the social media company, of course they're spending this money and effort and studying it in a scientific way, building a system so that you are actually addicted. That's exactly what they want. That's in a sense a great business strategy.
What's interesting is you're speaking from actual conversations you've had with people at these companies as well. Maybe not. Actually, I should ask instead of say that, but it's interesting on your website. It says the company we keep, and then you have a list of some of the really more hefty brands that you work with, and I'm seeing Facebook on there, and nothing against like any of these brands, but it's just fascinating because it is the company you keep. When we're constantly keeping company with something like Facebook, for example, by overindulging into it, it is like you say, it's amazing to see the addiction kind of grow, even from the knowing initially that it is rigged against us, not in a coming to get you type way, but as trying to get you addicted.
Well, it's yes. I mean, as the science has grown in understanding habit formation, and as technology's capability has grown to be able to be ubiquitous, be faster and easier to use, being able to automate and adapt to the addictive patterns in humans, this technology has become exceedingly advanced at achieving its objective. And it is one of the reasons that there has been such a dramatic financial gain for these juggernaut companies. I mean, of course, this is true, and I'm not actually saying it's that easy. There's many companies out there trying to do it, and they can't seem to figure out how to make it effortless and easy. So I'm not suggesting it's easy, but once they have cracked the code on these systems, that certainly they are spending far more money, effort, and energy than most of us are spending creating our own system. And that's precisely the idea of step 3, is that you've got to create a system that makes it as frictionless and easy and effortless as possible to do what you've identified as being essential, and to make it equally difficult, challenging, friction-filled to do the things that are non-essential. You want to make it hard to do what's non-essential and easy to do what's essential, because the system, we've got to try and stack the decks in our favor, at least neutralize the current status quo, and maybe build it in our favor, so that over time, as we keep investing in building a system that it becomes easier and easier, it actually starts to work in our favor. And there's a variety of ways to make things effortless over time. One, of course, is habit formation. 2 is building the right routines. That's not the same as habit, but you build routines and expectations. Another thing, eventually, you can build expectations with people around you in your family, for example, as we use that example. Everyone else is expecting at 2:00, and that's when it's going to happen. So they're aligning their schedules to be available at that time. That creates cultural norms and expectations, and everyone's now supporting it and wondering why you weren't available if you didn't call, and so on. And all of this is to construct systems that really work in our favor and help us. On the days we don't feel like doing it, we still do it. On the days that our willpower would fail us, which is often, the system works and helps us to go forward.
Listening allows you to multitask. Let's say you're driving to work, you're running errands, cleaning up on a Saturday, whatever you're doing. And that's why I've reached out to Audible.com. I became an Audible affiliate so you can get a free audiobook. I use Audible for many of my audiobooks, tremendous selection of books readily available. So if you don't want to spend a monthly subscription to Audible, put in your name and email, at which point you can listen to that audiobook, keep it forever, and cancel your subscription before 30 days so that you don't get charged for the monthly subscription. This way you get a free book. Go to triplehaudiobook.com. That's HHH audiobook.com.
And certainly for me, this is what I'm actively, seriously trying to do in my life, with my family, with my wife Anna, with our children, with the business, is to construct a system that works better and better over time.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to put my energy not into direct execution, but trying to put it into building a system that then produces the results that you're trying to achieve.
Powerful. Greg, thank you. I want to let you know, of course, I think you can see here we are going over 40 minutes. Are you okay to go for another 5 to get to the conclusion here?
Yes, I'd be fine.
Okay. All right. On that vein, do you have off the top of your head, I'm curious, what are a tech tool or software solutions that you like using on the day-to-day to help with this?
By a country mile, my favorite technology is not digital, and I don't say that as a Luddite, right? I've spent my time in technology, and
you only write with a scratch pen in candlelight.
I don't think a lot of us would be in worse shape if we did that. I really genuinely think that, I mean, if you broaden the term technology, it's any tool that enables you to do something better than you can without it, and the technologies that I think we ought to value the most are the ones that have been around the longest, because it shows that they're not fads. They've actually solved a particular problem well. And so, I mean, literally, I have a journal. I don't just use it in some reactive way. I use it really deliberately. I continue to use it in a very designful way. So I'm prototyping every week new ways to use it, and over time, I've found systems that have helped me enormously to be able to consistently do the things that are essential, to celebrate when I get it right, to course correct quickly when as soon as you're off, you're out of line, getting back to what really matters. And so that's certainly my favorite technology.
I know you've spent upwards of, I think you said 10 to 50, over a decade at this point, studying a very similar question to this. What do you think is holding back most proactive individuals from fully thriving and actually becoming the person that they know they can be?
I think it's all the stuff, all the good. Well, I won't just say good. I think it's all the stuff in the past, and some of that is the good stuff. But it's outdated worries. It's other people's expectations. It might even be intergenerational traumas, expectations, and experiences, meaning it isn't even necessarily things that have happened to you. It could be things that happened to your parents or even grandparents that you are maybe even only vaguely aware of. You might not even have language to talk about them. Mm-hmm. But there's all of that stuff that has become invisible to people. And so they are limited by all of this outdated information. And you can just imagine, right, a fighter pilot trying to win in the sky, and if for some reason they're using data from yesterday, right? I mean, imagine how ridiculous.
That is great.
But that's exactly what I think is happening. And so people have all of these outdated ideas and beliefs and habits and cultural expectations and all of that clouding their perspective now. And so our job is to try and eliminate all of that and to see this moment clearly and to work out what's important now so that we can put our full energy into the right thing in this moment instead of being held hostage by outdated data.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. Wow. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show today and speaking with us about essentialism. go ahead and pick up his book. It is also available on Audible. And Greg, how can we, how can we show support to you, to your brand, and just how we connect with you?
I think the best thing to be able to continue the conversation is through my newsletter. So you can just go to gregmckeown.com, sign up for the newsletter. I don't spam anybody using that, but as the ideas evolve and as I have more to share, I write and share via that platform. And
you will get the first chapter of Essentialism free.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, so definitely go sign up for that newsletter. Guys, it's spelled McKeown. All of it's going to be in the notes below. Go check it out. Greg, if you had one last word to share with the audience, what would you say?
I just say the essential things are not going to be told to you by people outside of you. You got to find that little spark conscience inside of you, and just trust it a little bit at a time. Just enough for today, and keep following it, keep coming back to it, and eventually it will lead to a great and meaningful contribution in life.
Congratulations on making it to the end of this episode. What about this episode stood out to you? Next, I need your help sharing this show. I want this podcast to impact and reach 6,000 people per episode by August 31st, 2019. And I want us to reach 15,000 people per month by March 29th, 2020. Have you been enjoying multiple episodes of The Heart Healthy Hustle? I'm thrilled to share with you an exclusive invitation to join our new Facebook community. To get to know other Heart Healthy Hustlers, simply go to thehearthealthyhustle.com/Facebook, where you can expect to see different members of our community being featured weekly in Facebook Live calls. I appreciate all of your love and support, and I will see you in the next episode. As always, be generous on every occasion. There is a story for you, and live wide open.